Know my heart and mind. Welcome to the Empowering the Village podcast with your host Andrea Greer. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. We tackle the real questions and tricky topics you often wonder about, so you never have to journey alone. In this podcast, your host Andrea Greer is here to support you so children like me can thrive and flourish. Join us as we dive deep into discussions designed to empower, educate, and connect our community. Are you ready? Let's jump in.
Kia ora koutou and welcome to another episode of Empowering the Village. I am your host Andrea Greer, founder of Nurturing Relationships and a trauma and play therapist. And today I am absolutely honored and thrilled to have a very special guest with us. I'd like to introduce Chris. Chris Cole is a passionate advocate, educator, and leading voice in the dyslexia and learning differences space in Aotearoa. She brings a wealth of experience supporting tamariki, whānau, and educators to better understand how neurodiverse brains learn and thrive. Chris is deeply committed to shifting the narrative from deficit-based thinking to one that recognizes strengths, potential, and possibility. Through her work, she empowers communities with knowledge, tools, and compassion, helping create environments where all learners feel understood, valued, and capable. Chris, I have so much respect for the work that you do and impact that you're making across Aotearoa. It's such a privilege to have you today on the podcast. Welcome.
Kia ora, Andrea, and thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate that you've invited me here so I can have the time to talk to you about a topic that is really close to my heart and helping other people understand it. So thank you very much for having me here.
You're welcome. And only just 5 minutes ago, I learned that it's your birthday today. So happy birthday, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a privilege it is for me to share your birthday with you during this episode. So thank you.
Yeah. No, you're good as gold.
That's cool. So let's begin with some icebreaker questions to kind of ease into the conversation. So the first icebreaker question I have is, would you prefer a winter wonderland or tropical summer holiday?
Yeah, now this was interesting because I really appreciate you sending the questions out beforehand, which is actually dyslexia friendly. That's that approach. But I do find that icebreaker questions are quite hard for my dyslexic brain. So what I find with them is that it's almost like there's a right or wrong, and it doesn't sort of flow with the way my brain works. So it really made me think a lot more about that. So I appreciate this opportunity to sort of explain how it would work for a dyslexic brain. Dyslexic thinkers tend to think of like the experiences, the feel, they go wide with their thinking. So like for you to ask me that question about winter wonderland or the summer one is in my head, I'm starting to think, well, you know, in winter, like this time last year, I was in Nepal and it was sunny. So I think of that as sunny rather than winter. So do I talk about that? Or like winter, well, is that cold? So is that like, you know, an Invercargill, you know, sort of thing. So that's where my brain goes. It starts thinking about all those things. So therefore it then gets overloaded.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, I think, well, what do I say? How deep do I go? What am I supposed to say here? So I was thinking about that and I thought, well, okay, so if we were to do icebreakers and it was done in a dyslexia-informed approach, what would it look like? So it would sort of be along the lines of more open-ended questions that let the dyslexic thinkers sort of expand on the feeling and the theme of what it could be. So I actually went through, so I can give you some examples.
Yes,
yeah,
I love that.
Okay, so it was with the Winter Wonderland one. Perhaps a more dyslexia-friendly version would be: tell us about a type of holiday you really enjoy. So do you sort of see the difference?
Yes. So it's not so because the questions I kind of put together is. There's two choices, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's quite black and white. Whereas you're saying leave it a little bit more open-ended.
Yeah.
To create options for the dyslexic thinker to be able to then come up with their own ideas. Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly. And so it hooks into our strengths of, seeing patterns, the connections we make, because, connecting and with people is a really big thing like that with experiences. And so it gives us a chance to feel it on that level. And quite often with the right or wrong, black or white type of answering, dyslexics think, well, how deep do I go? So this gives us a chance to, that sort of falls away, like how deep do I go when you ask it with an open question. So, for example, tell us about a type of holiday you really enjoy. So I would go on to answer that. I would say, okay, somewhere where I'm, new experiences, that really, I get a lot of joy and motivation out of that. Especially if there's perhaps a bit of work involved, like it's a hiking trip or a biking trip. And, but also, I mean, most importantly for me is if it was with family, with my boys and my husband. So especially now that we're all in different places. So those are the types of things that, I would say I really enjoy. And it sort of comes up with a bit of a richer discussion.
Yes, absolutely. And this is so good. And this is why I was so excited to have you along on this podcast, because it is a topic that I don't really know much about. But yet I also see that there's so many gaps in our system where a lot of children are falling through the cracks, getting to high school where they're not understood. And so, just I've learned already so much just from that first question. And I'm just thinking about teachers, often when students arrive in morning time and they do the role, and they might ask a question very similar to what I have asked on the mat.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm just thinking about dyslexic students that often might get stuck, or their brain might spiral into all sorts of difficulties with that. And then maybe they might get frozen, or they may not know what to say. And then they might get punished or told off for that kind of behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see why they stop offering the answers, because they think, well, if someone answered, Winter Wonderland, or Tropical Summer, and they say, oh, Winter Wonderland, well, they'll be thinking, oh, is that the answer? Because I was thinking all this, and so they think, oh, so I've got it wrong, where they haven't. They've just done it a different, with their divergent thinking, they've just done it a different way. And sometimes I've found where, an adult has asked a dyslexic child for an answer, and they've gone and explained, based on their big picture and connection thinking, the teacher or the adult hasn't understood and doesn't sort of dwell into it or dive down into it and say, what is going on? Tell me more about that thinking, because it's that really helps to clarify for the dyslexic learner what's going on. And so there's a real mismatch in that communication style, I think, that you're referring to. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's have a look at the other kind of two questions that I've written down. Would you have other suggestions of how we were to, rephrase them for a dyslexic thinker? So the second one is, where is your favorite place to visit in the world? How would you rephrase that?
Yeah, so you could do something along the lines of, tell us about a place you really enjoyed visiting. The thing with these questions, if you put them into that dyslexia-friendly version, it's not that it's detrimental to other type of thinkers at all. So this, when you do it with a dyslexia-friendly approach, it's more inclusive.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
It benefits the dyslexia, and I'm thinking dyslexic thinkers, but also benefit, I'm sure, many other children in the classroom as well.
Yeah, and so, it's not a them or us, it's just, you're just being more inclusive with how you use your language.
Yeah.
So I can give you an answer to that. So tell us about, so a place I really enjoyed visiting, it's quite timely, is this time last year, we were, my husband and I were on our way to Everest Base Camp. Wow. In Nepal. So that had the, new experiences. We were working hard for it. So it had all the things that we like doing. So it was outstanding scenery. It was just, just get a buzz, still thinking about what it was like. It was the Southern Alps on steroids. It was amazing. And it was, a great test for our endurance. So really got to test ourselves and came back feeling, like we've really achieved something. And also staying in Kathmandu and seeing other cultures, that was a real eye-opener for me. That was the first time I've ever gone into a different culture like that. So it was an amazing experience. So that's we enjoyed that.
Awesome. Sounds very culturally rich.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
So cool.
Yep.
Awesome. And the third question, I phrased it as, what's your favorite thing to do to unwind? How would you rephrase that? Or
Yeah, and that's really close, because that's quite open, isn't it? And it's so what do you tend to do when you need to unwind? So I guess probably what I've just done there is added a bit of a feeling word, the need to unwind.
yes.
So it sort of hooks into, what it feels like for the dyslexic. Yeah, so for me, to unwind, for me it's exercise, gym work or walking, whatever it is, just being active is what helps me to disconnect and unwind.
That's cool. Just can you tell me a little bit more about why you would use that feeling sense for a dyslexic brain? Like why is it so important?
Well, one of the strengths that dyslexic thinkers have is this ability to sense how other people feel. So they have this deep empathy, and they really feel. So I've had a dyslexic say to me, like, when I walk into the room, I can sense how everyone's feeling. And so they pick up on that sort of stuff. So when they're remembering experiences, they remember what they see and they remember what they feel. And so if you can sort of hook into that feeling when you ask those questions, you get a richer answer because they're telling you what they felt in that moment.
Yeah, so more descriptive in terms of like a sensory kind of experience or emotion based?
Probably more emotion based, I think.
Yeah.
Rather than sensory. Yeah, it's just you just get it. It's a relational type of reasoning that they have. And so it's to do with observation too, because like in social settings, like they don't just take in what someone's saying, they take in how they say it. They take in the nuances, they take in the body language, the facial expressions. And, if someone was sitting there saying something that was quite nice, but their body language was like crossed arms or whatever, well, they would say, oh no, there's something off here. They just pick up on it. And sometimes they don't even realize they've picked up on it.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool, because in my trauma-informed kind of training that I do with teachers and schools, one of the most important things I talk about is that creating that neuroception of safety, the felt sense of safety within the body. And often it's, I focus on talking about our tone of voice, our facial expression, our, how we're communicating through our body. That is so, so important. So this is so cool, because it kind of is in line with the trauma-informed practice as well. As soon as a student comes into the classroom, when, a student and a teacher kind of, look at each other, it's like the students picking up on that body language.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And I actually have, in my experience, very limited experience of trauma-informed practice, it is dyslexia friendly.
Yes.
So there's a really good, connection between those two approaches that will work for a dyslexic learner.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cool. Awesome. So can you tell me, Chris, what first drew you to working in this space, this learning differences space?
Okay, yeah, so this is a bit of a journey. So how it all started, I'm actually an accountant by trade. So I was sort of, tracking along with that, and we had our kids. And when the kids were really young, we decided to travel overseas. So my oldest had been at school a couple of years and was struggling with learning to read, but I didn't get it. I didn't understand the why or anything. So we packed up, and us and the 4 kids, we went in, lived in a bus, travelled around Australia, and then went to the UK for a year. And in that time, we were going to homeschool. And when we started, my oldest, he really had a big reaction to it. So we just stopped actually and just travelled around and just sort of lived and learned through real life. Then when we got to the UK, we settled down into the learning. And doing that, after the UK, we went to Tasmania for a couple of years. In all these spaces, there were these amazing homeschooling groups that we would connect up with. And it was like in Tassie, I was really struggling for two of my kids, with their learning. And someone said to me, "Oh, have you thought about dyslexia?" And I thought, no. So I went online. I'm a bit of a research bunny, and looked at a checklist, and they just ticked the box. And that was the start. From then, I was just all over it. And it really connected with me. And I didn't realise until much later, and when I'd been working in this sector for a while, that actually I was dyslexic. I didn't realise until my late 40s, because, I could read and write, so I can't be dyslexic. So that was what started me on it. And then when we came back to New Zealand, I got into starting up a parent support group, and sort of it just all has gone from there.
Yeah, from your parenting journey to finding your passion, and now being a real fierce advocate for and making an impact around New Zealand.
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
so cool.
It's definitely my thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's so cool. So for those who may not fully understand, what is dyslexia?
Yeah, okay. So it's actually a label just given to describe a different way of thinking. And it's not the majority. So it's a minority. And, up to 20% of the population has dyslexia. Okay. And then there's the whole other part of neurodiversity or neurodivergence. There's ADHD and autism and all the other types as well. But of all those, dyslexia is the most common by over half of all the others. And so it runs in families. It's genetic. So if a parent is dyslexic, there's 50% chance a child will be. So that's it's an interesting stat, and it helps with if you see a child who's dyslexic and the parent might be struggling to engage with the school, the teachers, that could be the reason why from their own journey. It's so they've done brain scans that show that the brains are wired differently and different parts light up when they're reading, etc., like that. So those are the overall parts. So with this different way of thinking, it's like it has these challenges that come with it, that these higher effort zones, but there's also these strengths. And we generally know a lot more about the challenges rather than the strengths. And with dyslexic thinkers, these are strengths that are specific to the way they think. So we can see consistency with them. So the main ones they are big picture thinkers. So they will default to, and they like to see the big picture of what's happening. So that could be if they're working on a project or building Lego, they can see in their head before they start what they want to do. That
end goal.
Yeah, that's just the whole thing. And one of my sons said, I can picture an image in my head and just turn it all around and see all sides of it. So not all dyslexics do that, but some do. And so they have this big picture. They like to see that. And actually, if they don't see the big picture, that can actually stop them engaging or starting on a task or learning. So it's quite crucial. And so what that means is, as a parent or a teacher, if you're giving them instructions, they like to know who's going to be there. What time do I have to go? What do I have to wear? What is it going to look like? And so if they're going to somewhere new, if you can take them beforehand to get an idea, that helps them get the big picture of what to expect.
Yeah.
So that's one of them. The other one is they're really good at problem solving, like solution-focused thinking. So they'll think, how can I make this better? How do I make this work faster, better, for me? And they do this by recognizing patterns and connecting information in really different ways. It's the way that they connect information is not a typical way of doing it. So it can seem quite random from the outside, but it's very speedy. So sometimes it can be just a way someone has expressed something. They think it just makes everything in their head click together, and they'll come up with, oh, I see this is what needs to happen. But they're over here, and everyone who was talking is still over here, and they're like, what are you talking about, over here? And so that can sort of stop them from expressing the ideas because they're so far out of left field. So that, that out-of-box thinking you hear, that's that part.
Oh, awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So, and the other one is the one we talked about, like that deep empathy, understanding how other people feel. So that's a strength that they have. And visual-based learners, they will remember and retain information easier if they see it. Yeah. So if you sort of apply that into a learning situation, you can see that if they got the big picture, that before they started a project or a writing task, they've got a better chance of understanding what they have to do because it fits with their way of thinking. Yeah.
This is so cool because I'm learning just so much of, often especially in the education system, we follow such a traditional way or linear kind of way of thinking or learning, whereas in order for us to be inclusive, thinking about different ways of bringing in kinds of information, like providing more of a bigger picture, providing lots of visuals, providing lots of preparation in terms of, who is going to be there, what's going to happen, all that kind of predictability. Yeah.
Yeah, you've led on really nicely to talking about the challenges or the higher effort zones perfectly. So the reason I call them higher effort zones is just because these are hard for a dyslexic thinker doesn't mean they can't do them. It means that it takes more time and effort. So the parts that are really hard for dyslexic brains, dyslexia is a language processing issue. There's no visual component to it. It's all about processing language. So it makes it hard for them to hear the sounds that make up words, and so it takes more effort to learn to read and write and spell. Doesn't mean they can't do it. It takes more effort. And basically, the way their brain is structured, it's for parts of the reading, they're creating new pathways in their brain that for a neurotypical thinker are already there and easy to use. So it doesn't mean that they can't do it, but it's the effort they put in can sometimes be too much. So they stop. And especially if the instruction doesn't fit with the way their brain works or they're getting anxious about it, it becomes even harder. Yeah. So the other part that they struggle with is short-term memory.
Okay.
Yeah, so that can be things like, remembering the basic facts, but it can also be that if they're reading a sentence, by the time they get to the end of the sentence, they can't remember what they read at the start. So you might hear dyslexics talk about, I've had to read this sentence or this paragraph many times, and it's still not going in.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's even actually now, sometimes they might have two screens, holding the information on one computer screen while you'd go to another computer screen. That can be that short-term memory. That can be really hard as well. Yeah. And so the language processing, their short-term memory. The other thing that's a challenge is ordering and sequencing of information. So that can be, knowing the days of the week, knowing the months of the year. It can be the steps needed to tie a shoelace. It can be the steps needed to tidy up a bedroom. It can be the steps needed to start a learning task or a project and see whether, and know what they've got to do to get there. This one has a big impact more than people probably realise. So this is, dyslexics have the global picture in their head. So, for example, excuse me, if they had to do reading and the teacher says, write about what you did in the weekend. So the dyslexic thinker is thinking, well, I was with these people and I was sort of watching, this person because they were feeling a bit sad. And I did this as well. And then I was doing this and, there was really nice weather. I felt really good and I felt it was great being with my friends. And so they think, well, where do they start? Because they've got the whole thing in their head. What point do I start? What do I write about? So they end up writing about, thinking, I've got to write about all this. And so it's really hard for them to judge, how much do I write about? Where do I start? And so they've got all this in their head, and they're expected to write it like this in a sequence, in an order that flows and makes sense. Really difficult. So they can't do that sequencing in their head. They have to do it externally.
Yes, I can see how students would get so overwhelmed and then maybe get kind of frozen, or there's a little bit of paralysis. Is that what you've noticed?
Oh, without a doubt. And that actually ends up being a bigger deal than these challenges, I've found, and especially as they get older and go through the schooling system. And so any strategies that we have to put in place have to bring all that into account as well, so we can get the brain engaged. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the brain? Because you just touched a little bit about that. But can you tell us what is so unique about the dyslexic brain?
Well, they're still doing work on, studies on this, but Sally Shaywitz, she's done some, the fMRI scans of dyslexic brains when they've been reading. And what they've found is, there's parts that don't light up for a dyslexic brain, and those ones especially are the ones where it's easy to retrieve the information. So if someone who wasn't dyslexic was learning a new word, they can learn the sounds of it, they can learn how to spell it and read it, and they can store it and retrieve it pretty quickly after a few goes. Someone with dyslexia it takes them longer. So a lot more, essentially because they've got to create this new pathway to be able to do that.
So in order to get there, they have to go through so much more layers in the brain.
Yeah, it's... So the structured literacy that they've brought in is a really good tool for dyslexics, because it's structured and it's ordered, so it builds and builds. But it still needs to be done in a way that still can work for their brain, which is how to manage their, if their brain goes offline from anxiety or anything like that.
Yes, yeah. So I'm hearing you say the structured literacy is an awesome tool. How would teachers be able to adapt that structured literacy to suit a dyslexic student better in their classroom? Well,
it's I think how it's set up with the structure, it's structured and it's clear, and it's like, sort of preempting what we're going to learn and things like that. That's really helpful. Dyslexics need more time, but it's still, if a dyslexic student doesn't feel okay with that teacher, then their brain's not going to be engaged or in a place to take in the information as easily, if at all. So it's all about setting up the environment so they're in the best place for their brain to be taking it in. So it can be a really good program, but you've got to think, okay, what's happening out here? Because if a dyslexic student think a teacher's got a growly voice, that's what they focus on. They don't focus on what that growly voice is trying to teach them. They focus, that voice is growly, I don't feel okay or safe, I'm not going to, so the brain shuts down.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we really focus on in the core of trauma-informed practice is relational felt safety.
Yes.
And so if a student is not feeling relationally safe within the relationship between the teacher and the student, then they're going to be in that survival mode. And we know if they're in survival mode, no learning can take place. So.
And that's it. That's it exactly. And that's what happens with these dyslexic kids, in the classroom. And that carries through to adulthood. And, I see it in the workplace.
Yes, yeah.
If I can, there's just one other thing too with the challenges with dyslexic thinking that is quite crucial as well, is processing verbal information can be hard for them. And what I find here is that, if a person, an adult, a parent or a teacher is using a lot of words to, explain something or give instructions, dyslexic thinker has to, if they've got no context of what they're talking about, really it's hard for them to try and picture what they're meaning. So it can really be hard for them to take in verbal information without a bit of context. If they're using too many words, they're trying to work out the big picture of what's going on and they'll get lost. So how they process verbal information has a big impact. And I really saw that when I did some work with teens, that, all they wanted was instructions, better, clearer instructions. They just weren't understanding them.
Yeah.
And
Do you have some examples of how instructions could be better broken down or delivered?
Yeah, totally. So it's being sure that there's no other distracting noise happening, so that they can really engage with what's been said. And it's not that they can't hear, it's that how the brain is processing the verbal information. So you don't want distractions, because if it's hard for their brain, it's going to want to zip away, be distracted. This is hard for me, so I don't want to be here. So you really want to have the environment where their brain is going to stay with you as you give the instructions. Don't use too many words. Just say it. Don't put all the waffle or jargon around it. Just say it, and keep it short. And also, support it with visual information if you can. So if you're explaining a concept it's a new concept they're learning in the classroom, give them videos to look at, give them diagrams so they can get that context. So when you're giving them the information, that it's got something sort of to hang off, so that it sticks, and they say, oh, that connects with that, because that hooks into their connecting thinking, their problem-solving thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Just, providing lots of different kind of ways to scaffold the learner. That's so cool.
Because the thing, Andrea, with those challenges, if you think about it, and you alluded to it before, is that that's how they teach. All the areas that are harder for dyslexics is really how they are teaching in the classroom. And so you can see why it's so hard for our dyslexic learners.
Yeah, it's because a lot of instructions are very verbal as well. Yeah.
Short-term memory, ordering and sequencing.
Yeah. All that whole, planning a task and, write a story about this. And then, as you said, where do I even start? I've got all these ideas and.
Yeah. That's right.
Yes. Yeah. And just simple to, like you mentioned, break it down into simple visual cues even to get them started. That could be a really good tip.
Oh, yeah, like checklists, so that they know where to head and, what to do and when, in what order. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So cool. That's awesome. What are some key signs for parents or teachers for them to notice if a child has dyslexia?
Yeah, so this is, from the parent's point of view, I actually think what's going to happen is they're going to notice the emotional impact more than perhaps they'll notice the schoolwork. But so if I sort of give a bit of context here around that. So with dyslexic thinkers, the way they think is fine. It's when they go into an environment that, is misaligned with the way they think, that they start to struggle and they develop this emotional response, which is the low self-esteem, the frustration with, with themselves and with the system, and also the heightened anxiety around their learning. So this is really starting to get into that, the trauma idea part of it. But it's so the low self-esteem, it comes up because the frustration, because they see the student next to them who's already written 2 or 3 paragraphs and they haven't been able to start, and some people might say to them, well, just try harder, and they're trying as hard as they can. And I've never, ever come across a dyslexic student who hasn't wanted to learn to read and write, and so if they can't do it, it's not, it's not because they're not wanting to, especially when they're in primary. And so they, and people might say to them, well, you could do this yesterday and you can't do it today. So, what's going on? And that's the short-term memory. So they have this, these behaviors that come with like the low self-esteem. So it could be, perfectionism. It could be avoidance. It could be that they don't feel like they have any control over their learning. So if they do something well, it's, good luck. Or if they do something wrong, they personalize it and really take it on board. So it's the parents will see this this part and the frustration, because the child will come home and can have meltdowns because they've been working so hard at school to fit in. The other part to that is that parents will see, and the reason I'm sort of explaining this is because further on, this is where parents can make a really big difference for helping support their child, is this heightened anxiety. So this is, the dyslexic will mask if they're struggling. And I have seen 6-year-olds do this. They don't want the teachers to know they're struggling, that they're with their learning. So they will cover it up. And so they worry that it might be found out, that they don't know what they're doing, that they're dumb, essentially, because they think, someone will think I'm not smart. And so what happens is that that's sort of with them, but then they get put into situations where it's going to be, shown that they don't know what to do. So they might be asked to read aloud, or they might have to do something within a certain time, something like that. And that's when the anxiety spikes. And so, the chemicals, go into the prefrontal cortex, takes the brain offline. So when the brain's offline, they can't take in any learning and they can't show what they know. Wow. And so this feeling, is with them, and it happens multiple times a day. Wow. And over the work that I've done, I can give you some examples of what makes the brain go offline. And do you understand when I say brain offline?
Yes,
you know that
exactly. The prefrontal cortex shutting down.
Yeah. And we use this language because that's what dyslexics have said. That's what it feels like. And so, hearing the word test can do it. Having to do anything within a certain time. The teacher having a growly voice, really big one, that one. And, if information is given to them verbally, like an overload, that can shut it down. If it is visually too much information, can shut it down as well. Not seeing the big picture, don't know what to do, that can shut it down. Not knowing how to spell a word or how to actually even form a letter, because sometimes, they talk about the B's and D's hard. I actually have found in my work the G's and J's are harder. So just not knowing how to form that when they're writing a word can put their brain offline. So they can't finish their writing. Wow. Yeah, so those are some examples. So when I work with parents, I sort of help them say, okay, this is what's happening to their brain. It's going offline. Their self-esteem is struggling. They don't have a lot of confidence in themselves, and low confidence reduces motivation. So they're not motivated to engage and learn. So with the parents, it's like, okay, let's see if we can notice when your child's brain's going offline. And so start to use the language. So we give them the language, and at the end of the day, you might say to your child, what made your brain go offline today? So it's they start to talk about it, and it starts to lose its power. Yeah. In a way. Yeah. So how's that? Does that sort of line up with?
That's great, because, and I love how you said that parents will start to notice the behaviors first. And this is something that I always talk about, that children will communicate through their behaviors. They will show us before they can tell us that they are in distress or if they're struggling. So that's so key, isn't it? To look out for those behaviors of the, like the emotional meltdowns, the feeling of, like you're saying, struggling or feeling like a failure, and looking a little bit deeper, what is driving that behavior?
Yeah, because they're great indicators that something's hard for their brain. It's not the child, it's the brain, whatever's happening for their brain. And that's one of the other key things I talk about with parents is it's the brain. Talk about it, what made your brain go offline today? Yeah, you're not saying what made you go offline, it's your brain, because the system's not working for your brain. How can we make it easier for your brain?
Yes, and I love that. It's so empowering, because often children will, believe that there is something wrong with me. There is something, I'm broken, or there's something that's faulty about me. But if we externalize it to understanding, actually, no, there's nothing wrong with you. No. Your brain is wired differently. And that is the key, isn't it? In supporting them to understand, actually, there's nothing wrong with you, but your brain is unique.
That's exactly it. And it's it is hard, but you can get there. And actually, I've got this drawing that in the workshop we used to run, Growing Stars, which was all around helping children understand this, created a drawing, and I'll just put this down.
Yeah.
So if I give you that one, I'll give you that one. That's what we call a neurotypical thinker. So they can get there really fast. And then
Show that to the camera.
Yep. And then on this side, we've got our dyslexic thinker.
Wow.
So they take a longer time, it's more effort, but they get there. But look at the difference. Look at the experiences that they see on the way, so it's just still getting to the end, but it's just a different way.
Different path, yeah. So for the listeners that are not watching the video, I'm holding a piece of paper that has got a pathway that's pretty much running from top to bottom, and there are, like trees. I'm guessing those are trees along the way. So this is a neurotypical brain.
Yep.
And Chris is holding a different kind of picture where the pathway is kind of curving around and it's moving from left to right, and it's kind of like going in an S kind of shape. And so this is a really good picture that you've used with children to help them to understand how their brain works.
Yeah. And they'll say to the parents, I'm on the windy path.
Yeah.
And so what parents can do with that then is you can say you're not there yet, which is part of that growth mindset. Saying, it's going to take more effort, but you can get there, and you're just on the windy path.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it gives them a visual of, it is harder, but I'm going to get there. And it all builds into the fact that I know my brain can change. I can get there. It's that it's helping them see that, like even if you hook it into the examples of, like, remember how you were learning to ride your bike and it took you a while, but now you can do it? It's that type of thing. It's like, if you can hook it back to something that they've achieved, you say, remember how it was hard at the start, but now your brain can do it? That's what this is.
That's so cool. And I love that concept because of neuroplasticity, that our brain can continue to rewire and form neural pathways, which gives us hope.
Oh, without a doubt, like forever.
Yeah.
It's like it's
never too old to learn a new skill.
Yeah, that's right, which is great.
That's cool.
And so it's looking for the anxiety triggers is another key thing that the parents can do at home, and just that strength-based language, because it's very normal. Anxiety is all normal. It's just the brain is feeling unsafe, but that's a really good indicator, okay, what's happening for, that child's brain. What I do find too, though, is the parental anxiety that can kick in. And I know because I've been there, and I've, lay awake at night thinking about my kids and how they were going to go through school. And it was all that, the parent was getting really anxious, and what it does is it puts them into deficit thinking. So their language around the child can be quite deficit based because it's all about their struggles. So you've got to, as a parent, make sure you're balancing that out by noticing their strengths, especially if you can talk about their dyslexic strengths, saying like, oh, your brain is so good at seeing the big picture here. I like how you got that all together and understood it before you started.
Awesome.
And so being really targeted and specific with that feedback about the effort and what they've done well is one key thing to help increase self-esteem and improve motivation, so that as long as it's targeted and specific on effort.
Yes, that's cool. So you've talked about parents noticing the first kind of initial signs. What about teachers? Because you mentioned something very important here around masking. And I was thinking a lot of students that are dyslexic would mask in order to conform, or to not be called out, or not to look dumb or stupid. So what are some things that teachers need to be aware of and to look out for?
Yeah, this one is really interesting because, dyslexics are really good problem solvers, and so they can get really creative with how they mask. So some examples are, being so helpful that the teacher doesn't notice I'm not reading, that type of thing. Or my behavior is, I'll do something and create something so the teacher's distracted from the fact I'm not reading. Or right. So they can get very, very creative. Be the class clown, be really charismatic. So some can be negative or positive, outcomes for the learner. So the teacher being aware of that behavior can be one of the things, but it's really hard because their masking is so good. They keep it together at school that by the time they get home, they're exhausted and they'll let it out for, mum or dad. So at home, they're seeing all this anxiety and the self-esteem, but at school they're not. So the communication between home and school is key. The parents have to let the school teachers know what's happening at home. And I've found that when teachers hear that, they're like, oh, we didn't realise, what can we do? And so sometimes it can be, just the homework is the trigger, but just sort of taking the pressure off the homework to help that anxious brain, for the child settle down. So there's communication with home. The other thing that is really helpful for teachers is just learning about what is dyslexic thinking,
Yes.
The challenges for them and the strengths, and just having that awareness to help the anxiety that comes with it, just what, some examples of it could be, and being aware and noticing, because you can't really do anything about it unless you notice it.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm also thinking back to what you mentioned earlier on around, bringing in different ways to scaffold the dyslexic thinker. And so if you bring that into your classroom, it would be less likely that the child would need to mask because they have all these different tools or strategies they can hang on to, for example, like visual cues, breaking down with checklists, helping them with maybe I'm thinking social stories as well, pictures to help them prepare for what's to come.
Yep. Yeah. And, video of a topic, that type of thing. Yeah. Anything like that. Anything that hooks into their real life, hooking into any interests. I'd have to say, though, that top of the list, there's probably two key things. The first one is the relationship, because the student, the learner, if they feel like their teacher hasn't got their back or is looking to, jump on them or critique them or just sort of be, have a growly voice, their brain's offline.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter all those things they're doing in the classroom. They might work a wee bit, but if you want maximum benefit, their brain's got to be online. So they've got to feel safe. And the other thing that helps them is the predictability or routine. Because if they know what's coming up, they're not there thinking, what's going to come? Am I going to have to speak out loud? Or will I know what the teacher's going to ask me? So if if there's routine and predictability within how a lesson started, how lessons, how they go through the lessons, whether it's just by that teacher or by the syndicate in the school or across the whole school. So whatever classroom the student walks into, they know this language means this. This is going to be the first thing we do. This is going to, and so that frees up their cognitive space so that they think, I know what's coming, so I can concentrate on my learning.
Yeah, that's so cool. And this is so in line with trauma-informed practice. Relational safety first as the foundation,
Yeah.
and then creating that predictability as well.
Yeah, and you can see, right, how connected it is, that it's like a dyslexia-informed approach, from where I sit. Yeah. So,
I can just see how the two go hand in hand.
agree.
That's so cool. Awesome. Great. So, to the teacher, I know we've touched a little bit about this, but is there any more that you'd like to expand on to the teacher that is listening to this podcast? Are there any simple, practical ways that they can support dyslexic students in the classroom? So you talked about visual cues, videos, anything else?
Yeah. So, you're thinking about the brain going offline, working in techniques for soothing the brain, just whether you get up and move around for 5 minutes. And I think I think some teachers do this anyway, but understanding how crucial it is for our dyslexic thinkers, creating that relationship with the learner, like finding out what interests them, taking the time to have that connection, will benefit further down the track. Yeah, it's those are some key ones there. I find that once teachers are aware of how dyslexics think, because they're the teaching experts, they adapt what they teach to fit it in. I've just done some training recently with a local high school, and I gave them the information, and they were like, "Oh, so if we're doing this, we're not giving the big picture, so we could do it like this." So how do we give that information? Yeah. Yeah, and so I think and also talking with each other about, well, I'm doing this, well, I'm doing this, so it all they sort of build and support each other. Yeah. There's one thing I just want to mention, because this is specific to high school, is something, and you don't generally see it in primary school. And it came up when I was doing this training as well with this high school. Dyslexia is on a spectrum. So some dyslexics can really struggle with the reading and writing and spelling, where some dyslexics can learn to read and write and spell well enough to get through, to go to tertiary education, etc., and manage. Doesn't mean that it's easy, but they can manage. And generally I've found that those type of dyslexics that have managed or have adapted, I call them adapted dyslexics, they have quite strong visual memory. Yeah, and so they've sort of memorized their way through. But what can happen is, at high school, these adapted dyslexics, the strategies they have in place, when the workload increases and the pressure for exams kicks in, they can start to really struggle, like in year 10. So that's actually another indicator. If you've had a student that's sort of been managing, and then in year 10, year 11, it's like out of nowhere, they're just really struggling. That's their coping strategies for managing their dyslexia aren't working effectively and efficiently anymore. So their brain's going offline more, and they're getting into that anxiety spiral. And so they really shut down and struggle. Yeah.
I was just thinking, the brain is probably overloaded with, like, oh my goodness, all these strategies that I used in the past isn't working anymore, and so then shuts down.
Yes.
Thinking. Yeah.
And,
oh wow.
And they get so anxious, like, I can't do it now. And so their self-esteem drops, their motivation, the level of engagement decreases as well.
And I can see how then you might see it in behavior, where students might, you get refusal, you get defiance, you get school refusal as well.
Yeah.
Or you might get students that come across as defiant, for example, but it could be that at year 10, that is kind of like that crossroads, isn't it, of, increased pressure in terms of learning and workload, that this could be signs of dyslexia.
Yeah. So exactly. And so it's sort of thinking, looking under that behavior and thinking, well, why, what's happening? And it's, it's getting people to sort of to see the bigger picture or the bigger context of what's happening for that student. And of course, checking in at home. What are they seeing at home? Because parents will see that stuff first, because the child's most comfortable with their parent. And so that's why it's really important to have that communication.
Yeah. So, for example, if parents are seeing these signs, and the teachers are also observing these behaviors, and they kind of are in a place where they're thinking, this could be dyslexia, what are the next steps for them? Like, where do they take this?
Well, some schools have got the learning support coordinators and SENCOs, and there's a lot of knowledge now in our schools, especially in Southland. I think the schools down here have got quite good knowledge around this, and some schools actually have in-house testing, for dyslexia indicators, and that can be enough to sort of kickstart the support. Some schools don't need reports to kickstart support; they'll put it in place. So you really the parent wants to have a conversation, with the learning support coordinator or the school SENCO, the special education needs coordinator, to say, if I think my child's dyslexic, what support will there be? Because they might not need to have a report done at that stage. And so it's once again that communication, seeing what the school has in place. Some schools will say, look, you need to go get a report. And so I actually spelled New Zealand is a really good place to go, which is around, they're around New Zealand, and they're the top of the line reports. Some places do like indicator reports, but spelled is the diagnosis. So those can be the next steps. The other step would be for the parent, I think, to learn about it so that they can start to be really aware of their language when they're talking with their child, so that they're giving them the balance, the strength-based part of it, that these are the good parts of dyslexia.
Yes.
Yeah, because some people still, there's misconceptions about dyslexia that, if you're dyslexic, it's all over. You can't learn, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, it's not focusing on the deficits, but focusing on it's a different way of looking at the world and learning.
Yeah. And just at the moment, the schooling system isn't completely aligned with that way of thinking. And how can you best navigate that?
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. Okay, so what strengths do you consistently see in dyslexic thinkers that we should be celebrating more?
Well, it's those, the type of problem solving, the empathy, the big picture. I mean, because I do quite a bit in the workplace now. Those are the skill sets that workplaces are wanting. That it's the problem solving part is like pretty crucial now with what we want the world to be able to do, and it's ensuring, I think, too, I mean, the strengths that, what I've sort of said, but sometimes it's ensuring that there's enough people there listening to it, because quite often a dyslexic thinker can be drowned out by the majorities who all think, the neurotypical way. So it's making sure there is space for those strengths to come through, so that big picture thinking, the problem solving, how are we creating that environment for them to come through and shine? And, that deep empathy, the connection, I mean, that's the skill set, for someone who works with people, someone, in the workplace who's a team leader, having that skill set is really, there's skills that are important and are needed. We probably don't see them quite so much through the schooling system, but once you leave that, they're key in the workplace.
Yeah, I'm thinking innovators, entrepreneurs.
Oh, yes. So, totally. And the stats show that 35% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic. And I find it, a lot of dyslexics, they tend up to work for themselves, have an idea and just go for it, because it's quite hard to conform sometimes in the workplace.
And they're very big picture, probably thinking, and these patterns that they want to solve in the world.
Yeah, and they can see it all, and sometimes it's like the curse of dyslexic thinking I find for myself with the work I do is like, I can see this I need to do, and this and this and this and this, and sometimes I just need to stay and like get one thing done and finished.
And I can see how that overlaps so much with like ADHD. And do you find that there's a lot of similarity?
Yeah, so the co-occurrence of ADHD and dyslexia is really high. It's about 50%. And so there are slight differences, and, more because the ADHD part is around the executive functioning profile, and, having the sustained attention and goal-directed persistence, etc. So there are similarities. So when I talk to schools or workplaces, community groups, I say, like, I'm talking about dyslexia, but the strategies you can do are going to benefit all the other types of neurodivergence, because there are crossovers, there are similar things, especially around the emotional impact.
Yes.
Like the brain going offline and things like that. So, they are all individual and distinct, but similar.
Yeah. And I'm just, thinking back to all the different kind of strategies that you talked about today, it would support that neurodivergent learner in the classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially the whole relational safety. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see it, like, it's so key. It's such an important message to get across that, and I find that in schools, teachers do have the relationships, but they don't realise the value for the dyslexic learner, like how important it is.
Yes, to be seen and to be valued, which really kind of ties into the next question. If you could speak directly to a child or even an adult who feels that they're failing because of dyslexia, what would you want them to hear?
Yeah, now this was such a good question. I wrote it down because I really wanted to get my feeling. So quite often I have the sense of what I want to say, but I can't get the words out. So I took time with this and I wrote the words down. So I will read them out. So if I speak directly to a child, and I guess part of me is, putting myself there, is you are okay just the way you are. Your brain works differently to most people, and the system you're in is largely designed for how they think and learn. So of course it feels hard. You're often being asked to work in that higher effort zone, every day. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means the fit isn't right. You're on a different path. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. But these different paths mean different experiences, different ways of seeing things, and different strengths. And that's where your uniqueness comes from. So you're not here to fit into someone else's version of normal, because your path is your path. It's different. It may not always be clear or straightforward. You'll need to try things, and test things and work out what actually fits for you. And that's not failure. That's how you learn and how your brain will grow. So use the support around you to help you do this. Ask for help and keep trying things. And take the time to find your tribe and find others who think like you.
Wow, that's beautiful. Actually brought a tear to my eye. Yeah, because I just work with so many children, and I think of my own childhood struggling through school, being neurodivergent. And I think, that is what really I needed to hear as a child. And I'm just thinking of so many children out there, even adults who have believed that they are a failure, or that they're lost, or they've given up hope. But that message there has just given us hope that actually there's nothing wrong with you. You are okay.
Yeah.
And different is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And to understand it and own it. And there is hope, because when you're navigating through school, it can feel like it's going to be like that forever, but it's not. And I've got 4 boys, and 2 of them are dyslexic, and school was challenging for them. And we were lucky that we could homeschool. That gave us a bit of flexibility just at that time. But they went back into school and they had to adjust. And now they one is working with his dyslexic strengths as a software engineer. He's followed that path. And the other one has taken time, but he's now, just at an older age, worked out what he wants to do, and he's doing a degree in sports science.
Wow.
So it's they get there, they will get through school, and they will find their place. Sometimes it just takes a bit longer.
And so cool that they've got you as their village and their supporter.
Yes, sometimes they may not appreciate that, but yes.
That's so cool. That's awesome. If there was something you could say, Chris, to your younger self, what would you want her to hear?
This is another one that I wrote down, because it's like, okay, good questions. So, so this is, I took it really much, from the dyslexic point of view, and I always felt a bit different, a bit odd, like I hadn't been given the full manual on how life works. I would look at people and think, how do you know how to do that? I was like I was just a step out, or a step different. I spent a lot of time thinking I was missing something that everyone else just seemed to get. And what I'd say now is this: there is no manual. Life unfolds in chapters, and you're not behind it. You're just in a different part of the story.
Wow.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's the same thing. Each chapter or stage teaches you something that you'll need later. Even if it doesn't make sense at the time, it just all comes together. So it's like you're creating your big picture of your life. And, it might not be all at once, but it's enough to keep you moving forward. So, what I would say is stop trying to work it out, early. Just stay curious, back yourself, and trust that your way of thinking has a place in this world.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. No, yeah. You're welcome.
Oh, so beautiful. Awesome. Thank you, Chris. If people would like to connect with you or learn more about your work, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, so I've got a new website that's coming online very shortly, and that is chriscole.co.nz. So it's with my name. But I do have this resource that I wanted to share here. This is the book, that's based on a workshop that we did for Growing Stars, and it's not running anymore, but it's a parent guidebook. So it's pretty much everything we've talked about with strategies, in a bit more detail and things. And this is free, thanks to generous local funders. And so it can be picked up at Young Reflections in Invercargill, or you can download it online from dyslexiasupportsouth.org.nz. And so that's a free resource, and specifically for parents to understand dyslexic thinking.
Amazing. Oh, I can't wait. I've got a copy. Thank you for my copy, and I can't wait to look into it a little bit more.
Well, you're most welcome.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Chris, for coming along today and just sharing so much wisdom, but more than that, sharing your heart. I just felt your heart today, and so much wisdom that has come from lived experience and just journeying as a parent, but also a personal experience of going through life. And I know that today's episode is just going to benefit so many people listening to this. So thank you so much for the work that you do and the work that you do in the world as well.
No, thank you. I've really enjoyed being here and talking about it, and to being able to share this message and get the awareness out. That's what it's all about. So thank you, Andrea.
That's awesome. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening again to another episode of Empowering the Village. That wraps up another episode of Empowering the Village. I hope today's conversation has provided you with valuable insights and the inspiration you need to make a difference in the lives of the children you care deeply about. You don't have to navigate this journey alone. We have a wealth of additional resources, courses, and tools designed to empower you further. Head over to our learning platform at nurturingrelationships.thinkific.com to access resources and learning to continue making a positive impact. Thank you so much for listening and being a vital part of this community. Until next time, let's keep empowering the village.